Hello, friends. Tara here with a Wifey Wake Up, No Makeup podcast. Today, we are covering part 2 of Why Am I So Angry, Tired, Anxious, and Burned Out? So, yesterday, we covered a lot of mainly the physical things, right? And you might have thought, I'm aware that wasn't getting enough sleep. I'm aware that, I need to eat better. And that's great because I wanted to make sure that we're covering the basics, and I wanted to also share some remedies that can really dive deep. So they're not just superficial remedies, but they're remedies that can really get to the bottom of, or help you get to the bottom of issues. And today we're talking more on the emotional and spiritual plane, let's say. And these are things that can creep up on you from emotional scars, scars from relationships that have gone awry, long periods of stress, and maybe you're just a personality, I'm raising my hand here, that can tend to have a stuck mentality or is more melancholic. And that is a person that takes things in and might stew about them, think about them, more of a pensive nature, and may even kind of tend to extract the negative out of it a little bit more. And so if any of those relate, listen up. And these are things, again, wifey school is about the things that, of course, that affect us in marriage, because we are with our closest person, right? Our best friend. And we tend to kind of exude the things that are going on internally with the people who are closest to us. And hopefully we can manage that to an extent where it's not just like exploding onto them, that we are feeling better and better inside. We can manage ourselves so that it doesn't come out in a negative sense, because we want that from others, right? We don't want people just exploding all their stuff onto us either. And so, and ultimately, if you're like me, there gets to be a point where you're like, I have just had enough of myself. And so that's why I so want to share these things that I wish I had known years ago, that I hopefully maybe could have gotten through them sooner. And so I want that for you, and so that you can have better relationships and move on in your love relationship so much more smoothly. So the following, this is the rest of the list from yesterday, are really spiritual issues disguised as life issues. When I read through these, I was like, oh, yes, I read through these doing some research, and why so many of us, and women, I think things can really, bubble up. We get, you get hormones to a certain level, you get, you know what I mean. All right. So here's the list. I'm going to try to go through it briefly, but I want to make it really relatable, because sometimes I know for me, they weren't. So first example, perfect example, is unspoken bitterness or regret. Now, particularly, I'm raising my hand here. If you're a personality type where or you grew up in an environment where that was the environment of where bitterness, regret, resentment was just a part of growing up, it's hard to identify that that's actually what you're going through and that's what's inside. But that can build up, and then it can come out as sarcasm, just blatant, harsh remarks. It can feel like anger is building up, especially as, of course, resentment, anger, or resentment, bitterness can build up into anger. And so it's really important to watch that. And the thing is, it's so sneaky, particularly, if it's not one incident that happened that you're like, yep, that I am resentful about that and bitter about that. It might be the little things along the way. So that's why I said yesterday that our emotions are not just reactions, they're actually clues to what's going on. And so you want to ask yourself, what is it that maybe I'm bitter about or resenting? And I do have another podcast specifically about resentment. Another topic is comparison. Again, this is another thing that can just really build up. It used to be, before social media, that we were just comparing, if we were comparing to a neighbor or to a colleague, and there was just a handful of people to compare to. Now there's basically the whole world, and everything that marketers want us to see and compare ourselves to. That's actually part of the reason why I think my husband encouraged me to do the No Makeup podcast, is to not only be the representative of being truth and real because there's no facade, but also that when we see examples of just regular people, that helps us to, I think, be ourselves as well. And at least that's the hope, hopefully the message I hope to get across. So being really aware of what it is you're allowing into your mind, into your consciousness regarding comparison. And it can go as deeply as I'll say in our culture, that I'd say the generation I grew up in is just expectation, that you're going to live a certain way, you're going to make a certain income, and just being aware of what your expectations are as well. Okay, I'm going to go through these pretty quick. Also, repressed desires or burnout. And I'm going to insert a story here. I was going to hold on to the end, but it totally relates here. And there was, during the COVID era, my online herbal education business was taking off. Of course, right? People were stuck at home, wanted to learn about health and wellness. And I just got, I was already into it, of course, but I felt like I was strapped to my computer all the time. But I was also grateful, of course, that business was growing. And I got so in the mode of just working, doing, that it just became a regular habit of denying myself certain things. It started even to the point where I would deny myself going for a walk. And that was something that I really, really cherished. And that relates to yesterday's list, right? Being out in nature. And so we can experience repressed desires or burnout when we think, especially if we're an industrious type of person and very dutiful, write the to-do list, you want to really be mindful that you do make that time for yourself as well. And it's not like, oh, I need this time for myself. You all are draining me, whatever. It's just a kind, compassionate, recognizing that you need to fill that, of course, so that you can do the other things that you need to do. That topic can be a whole nother topic by itself. And I meant to say also, I realize that I'm skipping and over really important topics. And you probably yesterday are like, yeah, I know I don't sleep enough. Yeah, I know I don't eat right. I don't need someone else to tell me that. I'm hoping what I'm striving to do is provide some solutions that really help you to get to the bottom of issues, or like just even help you sleep a few nights better, so that you can, for example, so that you can really, or the apps, for example, that I mentioned, that really help you to see what's going on and really get to the bottom of things. So if it feels like I'm skipping over or being too brief, I apologize, but it's also on purpose so that we can cover and get to some root issues. If you want me to go deeper on any of these, just of course let me know in the comments. And I would love to hear from you, by the way, which one of these has really affected you? Which one of these really stands out to you? The other thing, similar to repressed desires or burnout, is loss of ritual. And I think this is something that is easy to overlook in our society. And again, when I say our society, I'm not knocking on it. I'm super grateful that I live where I do, in the US in particular. But we are very industrious as a whole, but it can come with a cost. And that cost can be, missing the deeper things in life that a certain fuel source that we need to keep us going really on that deeper level. And loss of ritual. We have rhythm. We wake up at a certain time, have all these things that we need to do to get out the door or for life to happen. But ritual is not the same as rhythm or a schedule. Ritual is something like maybe your morning coffee. Maybe it's just 10 minutes that you have alone in silence, or going for a walk after dinner. Or it could even be something as broad as your summer week vacation, and that you go out into nature and you take that time, or you take time for prayer. And that ritual is what helps build those pauses in our life and help us to tune into the things that are very deeply valuable, and not just the daily running. Another topic is trying to heal alone. Now, I've spoken before briefly about being estranged from my family of origin, and I certainly was very guilty of trying to heal alone. First of all, because I was estranged from my whole family of origin. I was disowned by really just a couple of people, but when you don't know how far the mental illness goes or how far the story goes, and I was young, I was in my late teens, early 20s. I didn't know who else knew their side of the story, and I didn't have it in me, just like emotionally and energetically, to even confront, do any confrontation and explain my side of the story. And so the healing, I ended up, fortunately, I had wonderful people in my husband's family to help heal with, but I ended up really isolating with self-help books, with a single therapist, which is very helpful. I think that is a way to initiate opening up to broader healing and not healing alone. But it was not healthy to do that. And another thing is I was ashamed to actually share my story because I thought it was so terrible. Like, how would people judge me? And I thought that no one else had family issues. But years later, I realized that a lot of people have family issues, and that's why I'm sharing now. It's not to rake them over the coals. I do my best to mindfully share what is necessary from my story in order to convey what happened, but not to, like I said, rake them over the coals. It's not about vengeance, it's about helping. And I want you to know, if you are going through issues, the likelihood that someone else has gone through it, especially with family issues, is high. So make sure, I'm not encouraging you to accept, as they say, air your dirty laundry, but find people in a group that you can discuss this with, and especially people who've been through it. Again, that's why I'm speaking, who can help you get to the next phase rather than the tendency, which is to rehash and go over the problems over and over again. Okay, the next one is hypervigilance from trauma. And so even when we're safe, our body is still in DEFCON mode, and that's exhausting. And I would say certainly in the earlier phases when I was dealing with family trauma, that was the case. The emotions would overcome me so often, in my mind in particular. I was trying to go about life that it constantly renewed those feelings. So that's something definitely be aware of. And if you're feeling that, absolutely get help with a counselor on that one. And I'm going to provide one big solution at the end that I wish I had known 20 some years ago. And lastly, this all relates, right, is unprocessed grief. It might be from a loss or a betrayal, from losing someone along the way. And you can have feelings from fatigue, irritability, numbness, that it really spans the gamut. And with all this, that's the last example, but with all of these, like I mentioned in the notes in yesterday's class, or episode, I don't think I elucidated on this very much. I really knew that something was wrong when it was a good year and a half when I hadn't cried. And I was never the type of person that was an easy crier anyways, but I knew that, like, wow, it's been like a year and a half since I've really had any kind of emotion. And what I realized is that I had spent at that point almost a couple decades in so much emotion, from the family trauma to later then also having business colleagues who betrayed me, who said that I was stealing, which is totally counter any of my ethics and absolutely not true. Was very shocking and surprising. Going through COVID, I think for a lot of people was also very traumatic and stressful. For me, it was that I just had to focus so much on business. It was just really, really, really intense. And then around the same time, shortly after, my husband going through a life-threatening incident. The COVID, the two colleagues who accused me of stealing, and my husband going through life-threatening illness, all happened within a year or two. COVID was longer than that, so I had a nice warm-up period. And what happened is that the emotions were so intense that I ended up shutting them down. And so that's where I went from not only being able to experience the great things. It really caught my attention, like I said, when I hadn't cried for like a year and a half. And by shutting my emotions down, it helped in the sense that I was no longer going through the extremes of emotions. But what happens when you do that is that you no longer get to feel the joy as well. Yes, you might not experience the sadness or depression. Well, it ends up being depression, if not clinical, certainly a melancholic mood kind of depression. And that's the burnout. That was the burnout phase for me. So all that to get out to burnout. We talked about angry, tired, anxious. Anxious is also when you don't have answers. That's something I learned along the way, is when I feel anxious, and I've seen this in other people also, it's when they don't have answers for the scenario that they're in. And so the anxiety, the burnout, extreme situations in life-threatening situations, in your livelihood being threatened, are pretty extreme situations. And so all of this is to say, for this part 2, the big solution for me, therapy helped a good amount. Having wonderful people like my husband and his parents and family helped as well. But the one thing that I wish I had started 20 some years ago was reading the Bible on a daily basis. That by far has helped with so many of these issues, the unspoken bitterness or regret. That, I mean, at least 90% washed away. At least, I'm being conservative here. The comparisons issue of comparing to the outer world, or where I thought that I should be at this phase of life. Repressed desires, the burnout phase, basically denying myself. Instituting a new ritual of reading the Bible each morning has become such a source of healing, I could say, for me. I feel so much more at peace. And like I said to my husband, at peace, and my capacity for love has grown. And I know also that I am not healing alone. I feel that it's so much more beyond, it can't even be compared to talk therapy. When we talk about healing alone, even when you are alone doing the study, the meditation, the prayer, I know that I'm not alone, and I'm never alone. And all of this unprocessed grief, the trauma responses have diminished so much. That is the one thing that I wish I had started 20 some years ago. I actually started reading the Bible on a daily basis when I was going through the incident, the time when the two colleagues that were accusing me of stealing. And if you're wondering, like, okay, that sounds good, I'm on board with that, but how do I even start? That is admittedly the hardest thing. I started with Proverbs. For me, that was really helpful at that time in particular. And I just intuitively started in Proverbs. Then what I found really helpful after I was done with that, I still continued reading, but it was difficult. And I think we've all been there, any of us who have tried to bite into a daily dose of the Bible, or even a regular dose. The next thing I would recommend is the Bible in a Year, and you can find that for free on YouTube. I highly recommend it. You get just the right amount each day. It's maybe 10 to 20 minutes, and also some explanation, which is super helpful, right? Because there's especially Old Testament, there's so much context that is hard to understand. And I'll conclude with this, as I'm going on 20 minutes here, more time than I wanted to take, but I cannot emphasize enough how pivotal this was for me. And I thought, as I was starting Wifey school, I'm like, I don't want to be necessarily religious forward, because I know for me at a certain time that would have turned me off. I was all about, rocks and crystals and, that kind of stuff that I was diving into. And I just, that those times in my life in particular, throughout those 20 years that were the most, 20 some years really, that were so tumultuous. I live in an environment where it's predominantly Christian, and I don't recall anyone really reaching out in that sense and saying, try this. And so this is me not being it on the forefront of my podcast, but also not leaving it out, because it is, I think, the along with the help, love, consistency from my husband, it is the single thing that has helped absolutely the most in my life, that I absolutely wish I had started 20 some years ago. And if you're someone out there who's definitely going through, the anger, the tiredness, the anxiousness, the burnout, as so many of us do, and maybe you're feeling shame, grief, resentment, those are heavy, heavy emotions. And that takes some real heavy lifting, so to speak, emotionally and spiritually, to lift that. And I'll tell you, maybe hopefully in conclusion, that as I was reading, I really started to understand, I think, not claiming that I understand all of it. There's so much to dive into, but I really started to understand what is a hardened heart, because that was something my heart was being hardened over 20 some years. I understood then that it's not just a metaphor. It's not just a phrase, right? To say the stiff-necked people. I had a stiff neck that was so bad. Formerly, martial arts, yoga was my thing. I could do back bends, no problem. And I got to a point during this pivotal time that I'm mentioning that I could barely turn my head on its axis, a couple inches each way, and just totally in pain. So stiff neck, hard heart, those are not just phrases. They happen literally. So I'm going way over time, but I just hope that for even if one of you, that this is hitting home, to encourage you to just give it a try, because I tried many self-help books, all sorts of spiritual books, all sorts of spiritual guru type people. And I'll tell you, I'm so immensely grateful that I can't even quantify that I finally got to this point, that I can be so much more at peace and have a greater capacity of love as I go about this journey than ever before. And no matter what's going on outside of me, it doesn't mean that life is perfect outside of me. It just means that I can be more at peace internally, and then therefore externally. So I think that's a good point to end on. Would love to hear from you. Would love to hear about your journey. Just leave that a really open-ended question. What touched you in all this today? Would love to hear from you. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.